So today's session was really not planned in a planning way, but we sort of seized the opportunity because there was many people who asked that can we please have something more on the spirituality of Laylatul Qadr. So upon some reflection, I thought it would be nice to respond to those seeking some reflection on that topic, and at the same time giving the opportunity to particularly emphasize our spiritual practice related to Baitul Care, and of course to Laylatul Qadr itself. So right at the outset, I would like to remind all participants something very important, and that is a farman that Maulana Hazrat Imam had made, in which I am paraphrasing, in which our beloved Imam said that when you study the Holy Quran, when you study the Quran, you must seek to understand the esoteric meaning of those parts that you study. And what is important here, Maula says, esoteric means that which is written is there, but the meaning is not there to everyone. But it is there to those who are part of our Jamaat. So if you reflect on this holy guidance of the Imam, our beloved Imam is very strict and very particular, in which he does say that the meaning is there to those who are part of our Jamaat. You know that our whole tariqah is based on an esoteric understanding. And no one, absolutely no one, has the prerogative to define and to decide what that esoteric is except the Imam of the time. And it is the Holy Imam, through his holy farman and guidance, that guides the Jamaat to that esoteric path. And I want to strictly emphasize that the Imam has authorized no one to render what is esoteric into the exoteric. The esoteric must always remain esoteric, and the exoteric, exoteric. So, in sharing with you today some perspective, and in sharing with you some reflection on the esoteric, we must understand that this is not a matter of public debate, but rather it is a matter of internal privacy, and like all esoteric knowledge, it's kept in the heart. Remember this, it's kept in the heart, because it is in the heart that enlightenment happens. And I shall inshallah hopefully share some of that perspective too. But we must always remember, esoteric knowledge is very personal, and no one can impose it upon another. Therefore, when perspectives are shared, they are shared in the hope that people will relate to that perspective in their own personal ways, so that they never leave and they never have to be uncomfortable about the practice and the intimacy within which they understand the faith that we practice. Because our faith, Ismaili Tariqah, allows the believer the opportunity for that search. And that search cannot be impeded. It cannot be stopped. It cannot be made of obstacles. Rather, the door should be open so that people have the comfort to search. So if you ask yourself then, on this night of Laylatul Qadr, when the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam received the revelation. What followed from those revelations, according to the general popular belief, that was, in a sense, the beginning of Islam as we know it. But you know that Islam makes a claim to have been there from its very inception of creation. Right from when the creation began, that is when Islam began. It did not begin only at that particular time of that night of Laylatul Qadr. But that is not my subject. I'm only making that connection so that you understand and that you know where all of this thing is leading to. And remember, as I mentioned, my perspective in this particular session is the inner aspect which I'm coming to. But because it is the night of Qadr, I want to link that to understand that this is not something that came later. What I'm about to say to you has been there from the very beginning, from the very inception of the revelation of the faith of Islam. So the first important point amongst others is always to remember that Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was rather in his Bangi in the cave of Mount Hira. And that mountain within which that cave existed has been known as the Mountain of Light, Jabal al-Nur. That is significant, very significant in our tariqah, because in our tariqah we have a special relationship with the concept of Nur. And when the Holy Prophet was sitting in Bangi, an experience of cosmic proportion happened to him. And I'm coming to that in a second or two. But what followed from there, simply put, as people say, Islam. Well, then what is Islam? Let's go from that perspective. Islam is derived from the Arabic root salama, and it has two meanings. The first meaning is peace. That's the primary meaning. The second meaning is surrender. That is the secondary meaning. But Islam, from its root word, also means greeting, it means safety and salvation. And there are other derivatives in many ways that has been used over time. But looking at this equation, that Islam means peace, Islam means surrender, it also means greeting, it also means safety and salvation. When you translate that into practice, it means the perfect peace that comes when one's life is surrendered to the divine will. Remember this, because this is so significant in spiritual practice. The point I'm trying to make here at this moment is that the clues and the cues for spiritual practice in Islam was right there at the time of revelation. It wasn't something that came later, as sometimes many historians of mysticism seek to want to explain that that door was opened later. It was not. According to our tariqah, and I'm talking strictly about the Ismaili tariqah in Islam, according to the art and science of mystical prophetology, Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is Nur Nabuwat. In him is the Nur of Nabi. And it is said in Ismaili mystical text that when the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was born, the gates of seven heaven were flung open. Now imagine this. We are talking about the birth of the Prophet, not him waiting 40 years to get that revelation in the cave of Mount Hira. So this indicates something about the mystical nature of the Prophet, in a sense that he did not become a prophet at the age of 40. He was already a prophet at the time of his birth, to the extent that our Ginan says exactly that the day of his birth was so auspicious, so magnificent, so full of grace and blessing, prosperity and mercy, that the gates of seven heaven were just flung open and grace and mercy descended. That's why the Holy Quran, amongst other perspectives, says that the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is Rahmatul lil Alameen, meaning he is a mercy unto the whole creation, a mercy unto the whole mankind. Now imagine this, is a mercy unto the whole creation. This is enormously significant. So, coming back to the notion of Islam, what then is this perfect peace that comes when one is surrendered to the divine will? So in the broadest sense, one may say, the very idea of Islam is that through the use of the intellect, through the use of intelligence, which is the capacity that a human being has been gifted to be able to tell the difference, to be able to discern between the absolute and the relative, between the truth and its opposite, between light and darkness. The intellect, which when illuminated is able to make the difference. One, through the intellect, one should come to surrender to the will of the absolute, to the will of the divine, to the will of God. This is the meaning of the word Muslim. Underline that, because the meaning of the word Muslim is one who has accepted through free choice to conform his will to the divine will. This is a very important key to understand the mystical aspect of the practice down the road. So if you are following the trend of thought, and that is that the whole idea of Islam, through free choice, through the intellect, meaning through reasoning, through logic, through analysis, and eventually through conviction, is to accept through one's free choice and intelligence, to make sure that the human will is submitted and is conformed to the divine will. This is something that one has to understand when we link this to the notion of Laylatul Qadr. So let me here continue and show you the link. So let's come to this idea, this term, Laylatul Qadr. You already know the word Layl refers to night. But the word Qadr, I want here, in the context of what I have defined, is specifically focused on the aspect of the will.
Excuse me, there's a lot of background noise. Can people mute? Hello.
Can everybody please mute themselves? We don't have the mute all function. Please mute yourselves. Please mute yourselves.
You need to unmute.
The host can also mute everybody.
Yeah, lots of people are not muted, so it's so much disturbance.
No, you need to unmute.
Tabassum, can you try to mute everybody? Are you the co-host? Because I don't have that function. I can't find the mute all.
Oh.
Okay, it looks like everybody is muted, even Dr. Hassam. Can you please unmute Dr. Hassam so we can hear you?
Am I unmuted?
Yeah, now we can hear you.
All right. So if you have been following my trend of thoughts, that the whole idea about the human will submitted to the divine will, to the will of God, and when there is this alignment, that means the human will conforms to the divine will, then indeed that human being gets the perfect peace through the act of surrender, because his will is conformed to the divine will, and I underline true free choice and true intellectual illumination. Now, what does that to do with Laylatul Qadr, or the night of Qadr? Well, the thing here is this, that the word Qadr, or Qadr, also has in its definition not only just the word power, we said the night of power, not only just destiny, which is very important, the night of destiny, but it also has a meaning to say will. The very word that we say divine will, or the human will. So the notion of this night of power, night of destiny, also incorporates the word will in it. When we often speak about free will and predestination, well, there you are. This notion of the will is also integrated and incorporated into this whole notion of the word Qadr. As I said, there are many perspectives, but I'm focusing on this one for one very particular reason, which will become evident a little down the road. So the question we often ask is that, is divine will the one that determines everything? And there is the human will. Hence, we have this debate in many instances where people speak, is there free will or is everything predestined? That's a subject in itself. Perhaps sometime we may discuss, or we may come to it. So bear this idea in mind. I'm going to come back and reopen it down the road. But I simply want to reemphasize here that on the one hand, there is divine will. On the other hand, there is the human will. And the human will is not absolute. The human will is very limited. But the divine will is absolute. And what of the divine will? The divine will is the ability that the human being has to choose, just as the intellect is the ability to tell things apart. Through the intellect, you can tell what is absolute and what is relative, but the human will, following the intellect, is the ability, or if you like, the capacity to choose between the absolute or the relative, to choose the path that God indicates to the human being for achieving salvation, or the path that opposes that. So this is a very important concept in mystical practice. As I said, I'll come to it in a few moments. So that was one thing, the whole idea about Islam. He who submits himself to the divine will gains the perfect peace. Submission and peace. Now, within the development of understanding the various stages and various concepts in Islam, these stages of understanding and experience that is essentially sometimes codified as the Sharia, the Tariqat, the Hakikat, and the Marifat. What are they? Well, again, I'm making reference to these stages because they have an impact on the way in which we understand our Ismaili Satpant Dharam and in the way we understand our Tariqah. And because our beloved Imam has guided us to say that our Tariqah is an esoteric Tariqah, and because esoteric means that which is written is there, but the meaning is not there to everyone. So I seek to dig and share with you some of those meanings. So when you think about the Sharia is all Zahir, meaning exoteric. It is the outside. If you think about the Tariqah, it is a mixture of the Zahir and the Batin. And if you think of the Hakikat means the truth, but not just any truth. You know what is often said about the truth. There is personal truth, there is political truth, and there is objective truth. Now, I do not want to begin a philosophical debate, but simply to say this word hakikat has nothing to do with personal truth. It has nothing to do with political truth. It has to do with absolute truth. Just like the will of the divine is absolute, the hakikat in our faith is indeed the truth of the absolute, or we say it is the supreme truth. It is all batin, meaning this is the truth that comes from the nur of our beloved Imam. It is the truth that comes from the Imam and only the Imam, and to whom the Imam has entrusted the means to explain and deliver and clarify this truth, which is that which comes from the source of the Imam. We do not accept any other form of hakikat. Hakikat means the teachings that comes, the explanation, the inner meaning, the spiritual wisdom, the teaching that comes from the source of the Imam. Now there may be other groups out there, Sufi groups, etc., who have their own understanding of the hakikat, and that's fine. I'm referring to very specifically the truth that comes from the inner meaning given by the Imam. And that has to be very specific. You can't mix that with anything else, because this is an absolute truth. And only the Imam of the time can give that. That's why our whole tariqah revolves around the hakikat, which then enables the believer to access the marifat, and the marifat, in a technical term, we call it gnosis. And it is a higher form of batin, if you like, and it is the stage of spiritual enlightenment. Spiritual enlightenment and experience is marifat. When Mawla blesses a soul, and when Mawla blesses a soul by the fact that his nur will touch his light will touch that soul. It is spiritual enlightenment and experience of the divine light of Mawla's Nur. So we are concerned in this particular lecture about the Hakikat and the Marifat. And remember, dear participants, my intent is not here to give you an academic perspective because that has other connotation, but I'm speaking purely from an inner aspect of practice and the faith. So if we understand already these 4 stages of practice in Islam, the Shariat, the Tariqat, the Hakikat, and the Marifat, and by this definition, you have seen that the Hakikat is the Batin and the Marifat is the spiritual enlightenment and experience of the Nur. Our beloved 32nd Imam, Imam Shah Mustansir Billah alayhi salam, in one of the most mystical, illustrious texts that we consider it to be in the lineage of our peers, meaning these were the farmans of the 32nd Imam, which became and given the position of peer in our tariqah. One day in the near future, I will undertake, Mawla willing, inshallah, to give a lecture on the esoteric aspect of the peers. But for now, I would like you simply to note that we have a book that was considered to be a peer, and that book is known as Peer Pandiyati Jawan Mardi. Essentially, they are the Farman Mubarak of Imam Shah Mustansir Billah, our beloved 32nd Imam. Now, what does the Imam say in that book? Why did I give you that preface? Simply to tell you, these are the teachings of the Imam. Therefore, you go back to that Hakikat I just mentioned and look how the Imam defines the notion of Shariat, how the Imam defines what is Tariqat and Hakikat. Our beloved Imam says that the real believer, the Mu'min, is one who, from the observances of the rules of Shariat, arrives at the following rules of Tariqat. And from the latter, that is from the Tariqat, to the Hakikat, which is the real meaning, the batin of the Shariat. Isn't this absolutely amazing? So think about this. When there are these stages of experience, from the Shariat to the Tariqat, to the Hakikat, to the Marifat, here in the first instance, the Imam says that the true believer, so we are referring here to the Hakikati Mu'min, this is how the Imam defines this word, that the Mu'min, through the observances of the Sharia, comes to the Tariqat, and then from the Tariqat it comes to the Marifat, and to the Hakikat, and the Hakikat is the inner meaning, it is the actual meaning, the batin of the Shariat. So the Shariat has a batin, the Shariat has an inner meaning, and through the Tariqah we arrive at that Hakikat, at that inner meaning. And what is that? What is that inner meaning? Our beloved Imam further explains by giving this beautiful analogy. The Holy Imam says, Shariat may be compared to a candle. So if you take a candle, so Shariat can be compared to a candle. Tariqat to the path, and Hakikat to the destination. Then the Imam combines the meaning, and the Imam says, the foundation of Hakikat. Well, first he says that one must strive to walk along the correct path. Where these are the words of the Imam. one must strive to walk along the correct path, lit by the candle, and reach the abode, khana, of Haqiqat. Now, here the word correct path has to be understood, because the correct path is the path of Sirat al-Mustaqim. And what is that? So putting the notion of Shariat as a candle, Tariqat as a path, and Haqiqat to the destination, our beloved Imam says, the foundation of Haqiqat is to recognize the Imam. I repeat, our beloved Imam says, the foundation of Haqiqat is to recognize the Imam. And then the Holy Imam explains and says, the purpose, maqsood, the purpose of everything is the inner meaning, the batin, which forms its real substance, jawwar, its essence and sweetness. Therefore, the Imam says, the ultimate purpose of Shariat, introduced by the Prophet, was the inner meaning, the batin, which was the haqiqat, that is, the recognition of the Imam of the time. Please say salawat. This understanding is so fundamental because it distinguishes us from other meaning and other definition given by others. You can see here in this one example how the Holy Imam defines our path, defines our practice. In other words, even the definition of who we are comes from the source of Imamat, from the Imam. And it is the Imam who defines at any one time how the Jamaat is represented and defined. We do not need outside people to tell us how we should be defined. We are who we are in our practice by virtue of the fact that the Holy Imam, the Imam of the time, gives that meaning and that definition according to the time in which the Jamaat lives and manifests itself. But the inner meaning of that practice, the batin, revolves, the haqiqat revolves under the recognition of the Imam. So the foundation of haqiqat is to recognize the Imam according to this one example given by Imam Shah Mustansir Billah alayhi salam. And indeed it is the case today. That is the haqiqat. Now, here we come to some very esoteric aspect, very spiritual aspect. And I'm going to give you 3 examples related to the notion of the recognition of the Imam. My subject is not Imamat, simply to make sure that you do not lose perspective. Remember, in this presentation, I am seeking to combine the whole notion of our spiritual practice, going back to the night of Qadr, in which we have said the notion of power, but also the notion of destiny and divine will exist, and how the human will, when it conforms itself to the divine will, gains the perfect peace through that act of surrender, through free choice and intellectual illumination. And I want to emphasize that point. I want to drive that point to the axis whereby we can identify something of our spiritual practice. But before we can get there, there are certain conditions, certain requirements that in the batin of our tariqah, in the inner meaning of our practice, that we subscribe to. And as I have said just a moment ago, the whole idea of the haqiqat is the truth, the supreme truth that comes from the Imam of the time, and that comes from the teachings of previous Imams, and that tells us what it is. But in the interest of time this evening, and because it is a blessed night, we must have the ability to go to that root and connect ourselves with that inner meaning, that inner blessing. So then, what is the recognition of the Imam? So I want to quote to you sources from the Imam, and I'm going to take just 3 examples so that we understand the word recognition. Now remember, this is not only physical recognition, but it is also the esoteric recognition. It is also the spiritual recognition of the Imam. And my focus right now is that spiritual recognition. Remember, the physical recognition is rooted in the fact that the world or this creation cannot be without an Imam that exists. There has to be a manifest physical Imam, physically present on this earth to sustain the whole of the population of the earth itself, and creation itself, in whichever way you understand the word creation. That the foundation of all of that is the Imam. It is the Imam of the time. Without the Imam present, there cannot be any kind of existence. That is an esoteric truth of the hakikat, of the presence, the physical presence of the Imam has to be here on earth, without which there cannot be any existence. And there are many hadiths of the Prophet in this regard, which I won't go into because that is not the focus specifically today. So I want to bring to your notice 3 examples. And this first example, it's a very famous sermon that Hazrat Maulana Murtaza Ali alayhi salam, our beloved first Imam, gave in the mosque of Kufa, in which it is said from the top of the pulpit in the mosque of Kufa, Hazrat Ali, the commander of the faithful, the commander of the initiates, delivered this sermon. Now it's a very long sermon. It has more than 100 alliteration related to what Hazrat Maulana Murtaza Ali alayhi salam says. But Maulana Ali said to the people, Hazrat Ali said, people, question me before you lose me. Try to understand that. For, and then here, the Holy Imam describes his position. Maulana Murtaza Ali says, I am the treasurer of knowledge. I am the mystery of mysteries. I am the one who is intimate with those. I am the one who is intimate with those who praise God. I am the intimate friend of Gabriel. I am the pure chosen one of Michael. I am the conductor of thunder. I am the witness of the pack. I am the face of God. I am the eye of God. I am the hand of God. By the way, these words are in the Quran. When it says, I am the face of God. In the Quran, it says, Wajulla. When Maula Ali says, I am the eye of God, Ainullah. When he says, I am the hand of God, Yedullah. A word that we find in our dua also. And we know, I'm going to stop here for a second, and we know in our tariqah that holy hand of Imam That hand of the Holy Imam is Yadullah. And that is the very hand that Maula Bapa places on our shoulder. It is the hand of Hazrat Ali. It is the hand of all the Imams. It is that hand that is on our shoulder. That hand that guides us, that holds us, that protects us. And that is the hand of Allah. An Imam says, I am the hand of God. I am the tongue of God. I am the light of God. That is not news, right? I am the light of God. The Noor of Allah is the Noor of the Imam. Imam is the owner of that Noor. It is his Noor. And needless to remind you, the historic Farman of December 13, 1964, when Maula Bapa said to the whole Jamaat all across the world, and again, I can remember the Farman word to word, my beloved Imam says, through your Imam's immense love and affection for his spiritual children, his Noor has indicated to you where and in which direction to turn so as to obtain spiritual and worldly satisfaction. Unquote. So you can imagine when our beloved Imam makes a farman of this nature, and when he speaks about his Noor that indicates where to turn, we come back to the notion of hakikat that takes us to marifat, meaning when we know that absolute truth, we become privy and we become, with the will, blessing, compassion and love of the Imam, probably when his grace and mercy descends upon us, that we can have the experience of that marifat, that is experience his Noor through spiritual enlightenment. So Mora Murtazali says, I am the light of God. And he goes, there are, as I say, more than 100 such statements. Every single one of them is in the Quran. Perhaps one day that can be one presentation to see what are they and what do they mean. But let me continue by reading a few more. Mullah Murtazali say, I am the treasure of God in the heavens and on the earth. Look at this. I am the treasure of God in the heavens and on the earth. Why am I referring to this particular one? Because there is a hadith of Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And what does the hadith says? The hadith says, it's a hadith al-Qudusi, meaning Allah spoke directly through the tongue of the Prophet to the people. And that hadith says, I was a hidden treasure. Make the connection here. I was a hidden treasure. I wanted to make myself known. So I brought creation into existence. And what does Hazrat Ali says? I am the treasure of God in the heavens and on the earth. Do you see how this relates to the night of Qadr? And then Hazrat Ali continues and says, I am the power. I am the manifestation of he who manifests the power. And he says many other things. And then I've selected a few of these quotes. And then Mullah Ali continues and says, I am the Lord of the day of resurrection. I am the one who has raised up the heavens. I am the proof of God on earth and in the heavens. I am the light of guidance. Think about this. Just a minute ago, I quoted you the Farman. The Imam said through his Noor, he guides us to obtain spiritual and material satisfaction. And Hazrat Ali says, I am the light of guidance. No difference. I continue further. And then Maula Ali says, I am he in pre-existence concluded the pact which the spirits and he who declared to them by the commandment of the Eternal, am I not your Lord? This statement and the quotation, am I not your Lord? It appears in the 7th chapter, Surah number 7, verse 172. And this statement, am I not your Lord? Alastu bi Rabbikum. Mullah Ali says, I am the one who said it. Now there is a huge mystical, esoteric aspect to this notion. If there is time later on, I may share it with some things with you, but simply to say, look at how our beloved first Imam mentions this. Then, he continues and says, I am the first, I am the last, I am the hidden, I am the manifest. I am the light of the prophets. This is very important. I am the first, Al-Awwal. I am the last, Al-Akhir. I am the hidden, Al-Batin. And I am the manifest, Al-Zahir. Do you see this the connection with the notion of Zahir and Batin? Make it. Then our beloved first Imam says, I am the light of the prophets. So which light did Prophet Muhammad receive and when? Make the connection. Make the connection. This is our esoteric meaning. And then the Imam continues. It's the same lecture. This is a whole one lecture, but I've simply selected specific quotation. Mullah Murtaza Ali says, I am the creator. And then a little down the road, he says, I am the creator, I am the created, I am the contemplator, I am the contemplated, I am the Lord of the Kaaba, I am the month of Ramzan. Which month are we in? We are in the holy month of Ramzan, the 9th month of the Muslim calendar. Hazrat Ali says, I am the month of Ramzan, and then he says, I am the night of destiny. Can you make the connection? I am the night of destiny. I am Laylatul Qadr. A moment ago, I mentioned to you the notion, the Laylatul Qadr, the night of power, the night of destiny, the night of will, which I'm coming to it in a minute. Many other words are there. But here, in this expression, Mullah Murtaza Ali says, I am the night of destiny. So, I am Laylatul Qadr. So it means what? It means Mullah Bapa himself is Laylatul Qadr. Hazrat Imam himself is Laylatul Qadr. Laylatul Qadr means, if you want to take it in reverse and says, wow, there was a revelation that came. A revelation that came to the Prophet. You know, revelation means something that was hidden and then was made open. So it was a revelation. The revelation is this. Mullah Bapa himself is Laylatul Qadr. Hazrat Imam himself is Laylatul Qadr. That is our focus. That is the whole purpose of our celebration tonight and every night and every day and every minute and every second and every hour of that day and every day of the year until the day we leave this earth. That is our Laylatul Qadr, to have this recognition that Imam is Laylatul Qadr. Let me continue. And then perhaps one comment. Imam said, Mullah Murtaza Ali say, I am the Lord of the Kaaba. What is this Kaaba? The word all Muslims accept. All Muslims accept without exception. And I want you to think logically, intellectually, analytically. Kaabatullah. Muslim says Kaabatullah. Kaaba is the house of God. Kaabatullah. In the whole history of the Kaaba, there was only one and one being that was ever born inside the Kaaba. And that was Hazrat Maulana Murtaza Ali alayhi salam, our beloved first Imam, please say salawat. Only Hazrat Ali was the only being who's ever been born in the Kaaba. And I would say to participants today and to others, it is fundamentally important that we must understand, know, and read the history of Hazrat Ali, because it constitutes an amazing foundation, and it constitutes the foundation of us understanding our mystical approach to our practice and to the salvation of our soul, for which Laylatul Qadr is all about. But what is significant in some other ways, when you look at the Kaaba, which is considered the house of God, the house of Allah by all Muslims, and the place where, when Muslims go for Hajj, for pilgrimage, they go to the Kaaba. Now we have some other meaning in our practice of what the Kaaba represents, besides the one that is where it is located in Saudi Arabia. But the Kaaba, esoterically, spiritually, also means our Jamaat Khana. So, but leaving that aside, because just wanted to make that connection, but there is something else that perhaps you might be interested to know about the Kaaba. Do you know, when you look at the earth, the Kaaba is situated in that spot on earth where the celestial axis pierces the earth. And that has been expressed by many other Muslim scientists in the present time about this miraculous position where the Kaaba is. So you can connect the dots. Kaabatullah, house of God, the only being to ever been born into that house was Hazrat Maulana Murtaza Ali alayhi salam. And the Kaaba has become and has been the place of pilgrimage for all Muslims. And the Kaaba is situated from a geographic point of view, where that spot is on earth, as I said, where the celestial axis pierces the earth. It would be interesting to analyze that in some other time, but simply to say, when Maulana Ali alayhi salam says that I am the Lord of the Kaaba, and then he continues, I'll just take one or two more. Maulana Murtaza Ali says, I am the light of lights, the Noor of the Noors. Maula Ali says, I am the secret of the letters. I am the secret of the letters. What is that? Do you know there are many chapters of the Holy Quran? And when you look at the beginning of those chapters, there are certain mystical letters in the beginning. Alif Lam Mim, Alif Vav Mim, Alif Lam Ra. Many chapters have these letters that even all Muslims accept that these are mystical letters, that no one knows the meaning of them. There are speculation, there are analysis done about them, there are certain expression given about them, but in this particular rendering, Maula Ali says, I am the secret of the letters. I am, in fact, it goes further to say, I am the Lord of the Alif Lam Mim. Absolutely wonderful. And then Maula Ali continues, as I said, he speaks many things, but I'm just giving to you hopefully some of those that you can perhaps relate to your own experience of understanding. Maula Ali says, I am he who enabled Moses to cross the sea. You know that example, right? Where when Moses was being followed by the Pharaoh and his army, and he reached the Red Sea with the Israelites, and he could not cross the sea. But then Moses prayed and got inspiration through that prayer and beseeched and pleaded and supplicated God that make a way, open the sea so my people can cross safely to the other side. Who was the one to whom he supplicated? Who was the one who responded to that supplication and opened the sea? Here Mullah Ali said, I am he who enabled Moses to cross the sea. And then Mullah Ali continues and says, I am he who spoke from the lips of Jesus while he was still in the cradle. If you read the various verses about Isa Nabi, Prophet Jesus alayhi salam, in the Holy Quran, and Allah says in the Quran that when Isa Nabi was in his cradle as a baby, soon after he was born from Bibi Maryam, as a baby in his cradle, imagine this, he could speak the language fully, like a full-grown human being. How is this possible for a baby? But the Quran testifies that. The Quran says, Isa Nabi, who is known as Ruhu Allah, meaning the Spirit of God, he was blessed with the ability to speak the human language fully. And Mullah Ali alayhi salam says, I am he who spoke from the lips of Jesus while he was still in the cradle. And Mullah Ali continues and says, I am he who speaks all languages. I am he, listen to this, I am he who traverses the 7 heavens and the 7 earth in the blink of an eye. If you have read many passages and parts of the Quran, there are references to the 7 heaven and to the 7 earth. Mullah Ali says, I am the one, in a blink of an eye, I can cross those 7 heavens and those 7 earth. And besides, just to give you another reference in this, Imam Sultan Muhammad Shah alayhi salam, when he ascended the holy throne of Imamat at the age of 8, he made a farman that makes reference to this by saying, whoever, he didn't say just Ismailis or Muslims, he said whoever invoked and called Mullah Ali when they were in difficulty and when they sought help from Mullah Ali, in a blink of an eye, Mullah Ali crossed the earth or wherever he was and appeared and was able to vanquish the difficulties, the calamities, the problems, and made the reality the request of the person. Is a farman, I'm simply quoting. You can interpret it any way you wish. And then Mullah Ali says, I am the compassionate. I am the merciful. I am the Most High. I am Ali bin Abi Talib. Please say salawat. So this was one example from our beloved first Imam, very selectively. As I said, there are hundreds of statements like these, and every statement is matched with a verse of the Quran. So you understand, these statements are not just made, they have a reference. Now, are you connecting the dots? Do you see the point of all of this? The Holy Prophet received the revelation on the night of Laylatul Qadr. Here is what I read to you, what Mullah Ali says. And every one of these statements are from the Quran. So to whom does the Quran is attributed to? What was the message in the Quran that came? It was this message. That's why the Holy Prophet was said, a part that we recite in the dua. The Holy Prophet was said, the Holy Prophet was guided to be said that, O Muhammad, declare to humanity the message that was entrusted to you. What message was that? The message about Ibadah. And if you do not do so, your mission would fail. And I have mentioned elsewhere in one of my other talks that the whole purpose of creation, the whole purpose of a 124,000 prophets who came on the face of this earth, and the whole purpose of all the books that were revealed, 104 of them according to tradition, and the last 4 mentioned into the Quran, the Psalms of David, the Torah of Prophet Moses alayhi salam, the Injil of Isa Nabi or Prophet Isa, Prophet Jesus, meaning the Gospels of Christ, and of course the Holy Quran brought by Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace upon all the prophets. All of these, the source is the Nur of Imamat, the Nur of Hazrat Ali. That's why this notion of revelation is so fundamentally spiritually important to know, that we in our faith, in the meaning and interpretation of our faith, we have connection, we have this link with the Alil Kitab, and we have a link with all other dharams that have come. We are not without it. It's, remember what Hazrat Ali said? That he was present with all the prophets. So if Hazrat Ali was present with all the prophets, how does that line run? Just taking this last cycle from Hazrat Adam alayhi salam, from Prophet Adam. The Imam with Adam, the Imam with Hazrat Adam alayhi salam was Maulana Shish. The Imam with Prophet Noah, so I'm taking the 7 great prophets, the 6 great prophets, the 6 stages, Adam, Noah, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, and Prophet Muhammad. These 6 cycles, if you like. So if you go back in history, it means roughly going back to maybe 9 or 10,000 years, something like that. I mean, we don't know the correct dates, but around there. So with Prophet Adam was Maulana Shish. With Prophet Noah, the Imam was Maulana Shem, from whose name, Shem, comes the word Sem, Semitic people, Semitic languages, and so on. Then, with Prophet Abraham was Hazrat Ismail. With Prophet Moses was Maulana Harun, or Aaron, as people say. With Prophet Jesus, Isa Nabi alayhi salam, it was Shimun as-Safa, Simon Peter, often referred to in other texts by our da'is as Maulana Malikus Salam. Something interesting here that you should know. Did you know that Isa Nabi, Prophet Jesus alayhi salam, says in one of his Gospels, he says, I will build my church on Petra. Petra means Peter. In the Christian theology of the popes, Peter is known to be the first pope. The first pope of the in Christian tradition was this Peter, Saint Peter. But this Peter, according to the declaration in our Tariqah, He was Shimun as-Safa, Simon Peter, and he was the first Christian pope. But by the declaration of Prophet Jesus, he was the foundation within which his, call it his church, would be built. Now, I only mention that by way of interest, simply for you to know that there goes the relation. And then, of course, with Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Imam was Hazrat Maulana Murtaza Ali, which what I have just referred to. So here is the one example from our beloved first Imam. Let me take a second example. It's a shorter one. And this example is from Imam Jafar Sadiq alayhi salam. And this example, this quotation rather, appears in one of the chapters of a monumental book written by Qazi Noman, who was the chief judge during the Fatimid time. And this is from the chapter of the book called the Book of Faith, Kitab al-Iman. And in this quotation, Imam Jafar Sadiq says, please listen carefully and analyze in your mind and try to connect the dots. Remember, what's the purpose of all of this? As I've said a moment ago, we were talking about the recognition of the Imam. What does that recognition mean? You have already heard what Mullah Murtaza Ali alayhi salam said in this Khutbatul Bayan, in this particular sermon. What does Maulana Jafar Sadiq alayhi salam says? And I quote, Imam Jafar Sadiq says, through us is God to be worshipped. Through us is God to be obeyed. And by not obeying rules laid down by us, disobedience is to be offered to God. Thus, he who obeys us indeed obeyed God. And likewise, he who disobeys us has disobeyed God. Obedience to the Imams as the highest priority, as a bounty of God to his creatures. Before I continue, I want to reread this. Obedience to the Imams as the highest priority, as a bounty of God to his creatures. My talk tonight is called The Bounties of Laylatul Qadr. It's from here. Then our beloved Imam continues. In fact, I'll reread it because the sentence continues. Obedience to the Imams, you know what that refers to, right? Farman. Farman Bardari is obedience to the Imam. Obedience to the Imams as the highest priority, as a bounty of God to his creatures. This is because no action whatsoever is acceptable to God save through us. And no man can be saved except through us. And no man can be subjected to punishment except through us. We are, accordingly, the gate of the Almighty and his proof. We are the trusted ones to guide his creatures and the guardians of God's secrets and the repositories of his knowledge. No one who repudiates our claim has a share in the bounties granted by God to man. Unquote. So this is from Imam Jafar Sadiq alayhi salam, our beloved fifth Imam. And if you have followed this quotation, the Imam basically explains and says, when you obey the Imam, when you obey the farmans of the Imam, you obey Allah. If you disobey the farmans of the Imam, you have disobeyed Allah. If you follow what the Imam says, you are following what Allah says. The love of the Imam, the devotion to the Imam is equated to Allah's love and devotion to Allah. It is one and the same. So if you are making this connection and you are connecting the dots, then you will come to know. We are not speaking about two different beings. So in this quotation also, there is something of fundamental importance. And I have to take a moment because I'm not just saying this thing to expand the subject, but it's connected to what I'm coming to. The notion of the will in Laylatul Qadr, which is our next approach. You heard in this quotation that if you obey the Imam, you have obeyed God. If you disobey the Imam, you have disobeyed God. Farman Bardari, first of all, is the source of salvation in our tariqah. Our holy peers in many of the Ginans have explained this. But one particular quote that comes from the Saloko says, Farman mane feratare. Simply put, if you want to be freed from the cycles of birth and rebirth into this earth, which is another issue to be discussed at some point, but simply put, if you want to get freedom, spiritual freedom, and aim to salvation, then there is only one path that will take you there. And that is follow the farmans of the Imam strictly. Don't add anything, don't take anything out. Follow the farman. Farman mane feratare. And if you follow the farman, which is what this quotation said, you obey the farman, then you have obeyed the word of God. Now, why is that significant? Take it to the story of Iblis in the Quran. You remember that story? In that story in the Quran, Allah says to Iblis, Azazel, Allah says to him, prostrate to Adam, because Allah had created Adam. He kneaded him with his own hands, so to speak. He made and created Adam. And he said to all the angels, prostrate to Adam. This is my command. And Iblis says, I will not prostrate, means he disobeyed. And when he was asked, why will you not prostrate? And he said, Lord, you told us not to prostrate to anyone except you. And I won't prostrate to him because he is made of earth. You made him of earth. But I am made of fire. And fire is superior to earth. And therefore I will not prostrate. Essentially, his pride and his ego came as an obstacle to the command of his Lord. What Iblis failed to understand, and we have a beautiful Ginan that explains all this event that happened. Allah e Qasam Sabuka. That Ginan is worth studying because it explains so many beautiful things. So, Iblis disobeyed the Farman. And what happened to him? He was excommunicated. He was no longer part of the grace and mercy of the Imam. Simply to tell you, look at the link that we have. And remember this notion when angels are asked to prostrate. That act of prostration is fundamental in our spiritual practice. It's not just a physical prostration, but it is also the prostration that we offer from the inner heart, from a mystical point of view, which is what I'm coming to. Now, the third example I wanted to give about recognition, very short one, and this example Actually, there'll be one more from Maulana Hazrat Imam, our present living Imam, which is in a farman that is amazing that you need to, make the connection. So in this farman, first of all, this is a farman made by our 47th Imam, Imam Aga Ali Shamaba, and it was made in Badarwa, Saud, 1878 AD. Look what the Imam says. And this farman, by the way, Hazrat Imam Sultan Muhammad alayhi salam has also mentioned this farman in the Kalam Imam-e Mubin. But here, our beloved 47th Imam, and then of course 48th Imam, look what he says. To give death, to make alive, to give life, to give sustenance, meaning Rozi. All this is in the hands of Ya Ali. To make rain, to reach the destination, whether a soul goes to heaven or in hell, all this is in the hands of Ya Ali. Only the true believers perceive the miracles of the Imam. We, the Imams, in descent from Imam Hussein, are present until today, and we shall remain until Qiyamah, and even after Qiyamah. Maulana Aga Ali Shah in Maksa, South, 1874 AD. Please say so. There are lots of farmans like that, but I'm just giving you the link. Maula Ali, Imam Jafar Sadiq. This is the farman of Aga Ali Shah Maba. There is a farman of Imam Sultan Muhammad Shah alayhi salam, and a farman that he quotes. In the interest of time, I did not take it, but I want to tell you that farman is in the Kalam Imam-e Mubin, and the Holy Imam gives the example of a Mu'min by the name of Nusayri. Nusayri lived during the time of Hazrat Ali, and it's a very important and interesting farma that Imam is making about who Nusayri was and what was his belief. In fact, his belief was the same as what I have just quoted to you. But someday in the future, if possible, we may come to that farma. But lastly, in this context, about the recognition of the Imam of the time, look at this holy farman, Dar es Salaam, March 14, 1997. And I want you to make the connection that I have been trying to inspire you to make, right from the time of revelation to the Holy Quran, to the message of Hazrat Ali, to what the Holy Prophet said, what Imam Jafar Sadiq said, alayhi salam, what our beloved Imam Aga Ali Shah Maba, 47th Imam said, and look at what the 49th Imam says. Make that connection. Our beloved Imam says, to each and every one of you, I give my warmest, best blessings for your happiness, for your unity in your Jamaat, for success in your worldly lives, for success in your spiritual lives, for strength on Sirat al-Mustaqim, for success in Batini life. Think about all of this first. Amazing. The Imam mentions the Batini life. The very Batin we've been trying to explore and just mention even in a small way. Then listen to this. For success in Batini life, that is very, very important. Then look what the beloved Imam says. Attend regularly Jamaat Khana, even outside the time of prayer. Now listen to this. Please make the connection. Our beloved Imam say, even outside the time of prayer, call the name of Allah or the name of the Imams on the tasbih. Call the name of Allah or the names of the Imams on the tasbih. But don't let your faith be absent from your everyday lives. Don't let that occur. This is very important. It is important today, and it is important tomorrow, and it is important in the years ahead. I give you my best affectionate blessings for Mushkila San and for the fulfillment of all your wishes. Please say so. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala. So dear participant, when you look at a Fahman like this, and Mola Bapa say, carry a tasbih with you, and in your tasbih, call the name of Allah or the name of the Imams. Look, it doesn't take a PhD in theology to figure out this connection. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to connect those dots. It's a simple, straightforward hakikat Imam is telling us. Take the name of Allah or take the name of the Imams. Any Imam or the Imam of the time, he has often said. This is the recognition of the Imam. Simply to summarize this part, let me say this to you. When we say, Ya Ali, Ali, Ya Ali, it is the total and complete manifestation of Allah's power. And when we say, Ya Muhammad is the manifestation of Allah's mercy, Allah's power, Allah's mercy. Combined together, we call it Ya Ali, Ya Muhammad. Or we say Pir Shah. Pir Shah. Today, in the time that we live, that Pir and that Shah is Mola Bapa himself, the 49th Imam, and he is the 50th Pir. So when we say Ya Ali, Ya Muhammad, it is Mola Bapa himself. The Noor of Ali and the Noor of Nabi are together. They are not separate. It's one Noor. And that's why we say Ya Ali, Ya Muhammad. In future presentations, I will have an opportunity to speak more about this aspect. So having said that, let me quickly turn to the aspect of Baitul Khiyal, or our spiritual practice. Now remember, members of the Jamaat, dear participant, Baitul Khiyal is a very personal matter. It is not something anybody can make claims about it. It is an inner practice of our faith. But because we are close to that time, and that was the intended purpose of all of this, that I've just said, that bounties of Laylatul Qadr, this is the fundamental, the ultimate gift, the ultimate generosity that Imam expresses to our soul, to our being, that is to be reflected on this important night. So, in case you are feeling sleepy, Maulana Rumi, Jalaluddin Rumi says, he says, just to quote his poetry, it's so beautiful, he says, the breeze at dawn has secrets to tell you. Remember the verse of the Suratul Qadr? Spirits and angels descends by permission of the Lord with all decrees, and there is peace until the rising of the dawn. So I'll give you one interpretation. People are giving many of them, but I'll give you one. But here, Jalaluddin Rumi says, the breeze at dawn has secrets to tell you. Don't go back to sleep, Rumi says. You must ask. You must ask for what you really want. Don't go back to sleep, Rumi says. People are going back and forth across the door sill where the two worlds touch. The door is round and open. Don't go back to sleep. Now, I'm not going to take time to give you some explanatory meaning on this, but you can understand the sense of it. So now, let us come to the aspect of our own practice, and where the notion of this destiny and will in the notion of Laylatul Qadr or Suratul Qadr connects. So first, a Ginan of Holy Pir Shams given in the Sarakomoto. I wish I had the voice to recite it. My voice is rather cracky at the moment, but I'll read the words and quickly give you a meaning and then go on from there. So the Holy Pir says, Satgur Kahere, Dil Mahe Dil Pujiye, Ane Dil Mahe Deve Dua, Dil Mahe Sahiya Ape Vase, Ane Dil Mahe Ape Didar. Are you following these words? The Holy Pir says, Dil, 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 Dil. What does it mean? The Satgur says, Satgur has an amazing, profound meaning. This is not the word you find in YouTube and this and that. People use that word as their own titles or whatever. But the thing is, in the Ismaili Tariqa, the word Satgur is very specific and to whom it applies, just like the word Imam. But we leave that, but simply to say that divine teacher who has been entrusted with that spiritual wisdom, and that wisdom, when taken to illuminate the intellect and penetrates the inner heart, creates spiritual freedom and liberation of the soul. That is the meaning of the Satgur. And one who guarantees you, let me underline this, one who guarantees you spiritual freedom and knowledge that leads unto liberation. That is the Satgur. Not any other person. So here the Satgur says, in the heart, worship the Lord. And in the heart is the Lord, in the heart, worship the Lord. And in the heart is the abode of the Lord. In the heart resides the Lord himself. And it is in the heart he, the Lord, gives didar. Why am I quoting this? So that you may already begin to see some connection. Everything that is magical in mystical practice happens in the heart, the spiritual heart. It is the heart that receives the didar of the Imam. It is in the heart that Mola Bapa lives. The heart of the Mu'min, the heart of the faithful is the throne of God, the throne of the Imam. The heart of the believer is where it is the heart of God. And remember, this is a mystical thing. Mola Bapa says to us in many farmans, keep a clean heart and a pure soul. Why? Because that is where he lives. Keep the place where you have invited the Imam to be. The heart of the true believer is the place where the Imam resides. Mola Bapa is right here. So keep this place clean. How will you keep it clean? Follow his farman strictly. Don't deviate, don't add, don't take away. Follow his farman. By following the farmans of the Imam in the practice of our faith, including our Baitul practice, our spiritual practice, your heart will become pure. And tonight, the night of Laylatul Qadr, with the zikr, the tasbih, the grace, the mercy, that heart becomes polished. But most of all, it's an act of will. Here we come again. Here I am now making the connection, that will of Laylatul Qadr and the individual will. Do you remember the meaning that I made earlier on? Now, here, I want to say something very, very deeply connected to the practice of our bandi. Remember, dear participant, those who have made the promise to practice bandi, you have made a promise to Mola Bapa that you will practice bandi, and the time of bandi is coming near. At least tonight, out of all nights, do not miss it. Don't go to sleep, you remember? But this is the time when you practice your bandi, you have to bring in your contemplation something very important based on the holy farman Imam made to those who have made this promise for the spiritual enlightenment. Now, for example, Mola Bapa is saying, set aside worldly matters. He says that very clearly. Set aside worldly matters. Imam says, Mola Bapa says, don't sit in fear. If you sit in fear, it will shut the door. And many other guidance that he has given, someday in the future, we will extrapolate them and bring them to this course. But the one point I wish to make this time, related to Laylatul Qadr, related to the notion of destiny, particularly our material and spiritual destiny. So the first point is this. The Suratul Qadr says, angels and spirit descend by the permission of their Lord with all decrees. Which decree is that? Is it the decree you have decided? Is it the decree that you have asked? It could be that you are fortunate enough. But look, the secret of that decree is this. Don't decree anything. Rather, say to Mola Bapa in your heart. Remember what is Laylatul Qadr? Laylatul Qadr is Mola Bapa himself. Laylatul Qadr is the Imam himself. Laylatul Qadr is Hazrat Imam himself. So say to Mola Bapa in your heart, in prostration, not like Iblis, who had his ego and had his pride, in prostration, in the act of prostration, in the act of submission, meaning you present yourself as you are. Eliminated, you are nothing, and he is everything. That is the act of prostration. And you're saying to Mola Bapa, Mola Bapa, you decree for me. You are Laylatul Qadr. So you decree for me. You command for me what my destiny is going to be. Whatever it was in the past is the past, is gone. But from now, from this day, from this very moment, Mola Bapa, out of your mercy, out of your love, out of your compassion, like you said, Mola Bapa, it is through your love that your Noor indicates to us where to turn for spiritual and worldly satisfaction. So today, of all days, today more than ever, Mola Bapa, I beseech you, I plead before you, Mola Bapa, I supplicate to you, Mola Bapa, I prostrate before you, and Mola Bapa, I am saying, and all humility, saying, Mola Bapa, you decree for me. Let those decrees be the one that I follow and that becomes part of my destiny. And Mola Bapa, if you decree those for me coming from you, then I have made my choice. My will conform to the divine will. Remember the meaning of Islam in the beginning? He who submits himself to the divine will gains the perfect peace. That notion of perfect peace In the Quran, it says, Nafse Mutmaina, the soul that is at peace. It is an amazing concept. But today and every day, say, Mola Bapa, you decree for me. I am not going to say, because I know who you are. I know who you are. I know what revelation the Prophet brought. And just as the Prophet was completely submitted to those divine commands, to those decrees that came into the Holy Quran, Mola Bapa, today your farmans are my decrees, and on this particular night of Qadr, during my bangi, during my ibadah, you decree for me my path, my material, worldly, dunya destiny, and my spiritual deen destiny. And Mola Bapa, if you bless me with those decrees, because I have none to ask except what you will decree for me. Because remember, spirits and angels descend by the permission of the Lord with all decrees. Which one? Be smart. Ask the one that Mola wants. Because he, Mola Bapa, can see your map in front of him. He knows exactly when your soul appeared, what is it doing here, and where is it intended and supposed to go. So why don't you make it go where Mola wants it to go? In other words, what does that mean? Submit yourself. That very notion that came in the beginning of the revelation, that Islam means peace and it means surrender. This is a fundamental point in spiritual practice whereby the individual practitioner who is conducting the search under the guidance of the Holy Imam, you are submitting yourself to that guidance, and your search is guided by the Holy Imam. That means, first of all, please do not bring foreign element into the practice. Do you think when Mola Bapa says to us, set worldly matters aside, don't sit in fear, remember the Imam is holding your hand, remember the Imam is present before you. When the Imam says all of these things to us, in the context of our spiritual practice, do you think that you imagine that Imam has forgotten something, that you have to go outside and bring things inside? Think about it. Look, I'm not the one to tell you what you should do or not. That is your choice what you do. But I'm telling you very strictly, you can't have two mothers, right? Born out of that one mother. So ask yourself, do you clearly understand the directive, the direction, the guidance our beloved Imam has given with respect to our spiritual practice? And are you completely and totally submitted to it? So that your act of submission will give you that perfect peace that is intended. Now, let me add a footnote to what I have already said, and then we will bring this session to conclusion. When I mentioned the notion of Laylatul Qadr and about the power and the will, and a moment ago I mentioned, and before that I mentioned the notion of the will is to be able to choose between the absolute and the relative. So you are choosing. And when you submit yourself to that will, what happens? Do you know what keeps this whole creation and the whole cosmos and the millions and hundreds of millions of galaxies in the known universe that we have? And that is at the macro scale. And what about the other 7 heavens? What about the 7 earths? What about every single living creature on the face of this planet and elsewhere? There is a hadith of Holy Prophet Muhammad alayhi salam that says there are 18,000 realms, worlds of existence. And this world is only one. There are 18,000. What happens to all of that? The nur of Hazar Imam, the nur of the Imam is the source of the sustenance and maintenance. It is the will of the Imam that sustains all of that, including our life here on earth. Having said so, simply to tell you that it is the divine will of the Imam that penetrates every realm of existence. But because the human being has free will, like Azazil, you may momentarily think that, oh, you don't have to submit. You don't have to obey the divine command. You don't have, because your own ego or whatever the reason may be. Make no mistake. In spiritual practice, there is only one Lord and one source. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. He from whom we have come, to whom we will return. That is our concept in ibadat. And our ibadat that Imam gives us has to do with one and one principle exclusively and in totality. And that is the nur of the Imam. Because remember, in 1987, our beloved Imam said in one of the farmans in Portugal related to this, do not sit in Bandi in any other context except light. Except light. In sitting in Bandi, we must eliminate who we are. We must conform our will, if you like, to Maula's will, the divine will. You know why? Because the human being cannot do anything with their own will. That will has no power. That will has no battery. That will has no objective in spiritual matters. Al-Ruh min amra Rabbi. The soul is by the command of the Imam. It's the command by the Lord. That's what the Quran says. So think about it. The soul is by the command of the Imam. Are you going to exercise your will on matters of the soul? You may exercise your will if you wish to eat a hamburger or you want to eat a fish burger. You can choose that. But that too, for the mystics, it means something else. But let me say this. In spiritual matters related to the soul, you have zero power. That's why in this night of power, the night of Laylatul Qadr, this night of power is the will of the Imam upon the soul of the believers. So you align. You said, Mola Bapa, completely submitted to you. Allahumma laka sujudi wa taati. And I am nothing. Eliminate. You are everything. What I want is what you want. I conform my will to your will. And when we are able to conform our will to the will of the Imam, then we will see there is a different relationship. And that is what happened in the night of Laylatul Qadr, in the cave of Mount Hira, when the Holy Prophet was completely transformed by having submitted his will to the divine will. May Mawla bless you all. May Mawla's Noor be with you every step, every breath, in everything that you do. May Mawla, out of his love, compassion, and mercy, may Mawla grant you his Noor in your ibadat. May Mawla's Noor illuminate your intellect, illuminate your heart. Mawla give you didar in your heart, in your soul. May this night and this most precious time of ibadat now coming up, and these blessings of Laylatul Qadr, may they stay with you by the grace and mercy of Hazrat Imam. May these blessings and this grace stay with you every step, every breath, in everything that you do in din and dunya. And may all your difficulties, as Mawla Bapa has said in one of the farma, may all your difficulties disappear as if they never existed. May that be the truth and come to reality for each and every one of you. And whatever wishes you have, whatever desire that you have, whatever objective that you have, may Mawla grant it to you in every way, even those bounties that you haven't thought of. May Mawla grant it to you, and may Mawla decree for you the best of the best of the best of the best every day for everything that you do in your spiritual and material life. And may this Laylatul Qadr bring enormous happiness to you. Enormous happiness. May that happiness and that bliss be so high that every moment of your life you remember Mawla's name. Because there is no higher form of worship and prayer than continuously remembering the name of the Imam of the time. That is the secret of ultimate happiness and of everything. So, in that sense of the term, Mawla grant you with barakat, the barakat that you have never seen. And we sincerely supplicate, plead with Mawla to keep us all safe under the current circumstances, and that we may, inshallah, quickly resume normal life, especially resume Jumat Khana, because we miss it. Ya Ali Madad, and Mawla bless you with Zahiri, Batini, Nurani, Bidar. Thank you.